I walk into a bookstore and I get very woo-woo and I'm like, the books will speak to me. I just have to open myself up and whatever needs to emerge will emerge. So we're on a field trip. This is the book review from the New York Times. I'm MJ Franklin, in for Gilbert Cruz, and recently I left my desk, left the building, and journeyed out to visit one of my favorite bookstores in New York, McNally Jackson Seaport, down at the southern tip of Manhattan.
Whoa, it's so much bigger up here than I thought it was going to be.
This bookstore is low-key huge, which is also a really nice thing about McNally.
When we walked in, it was just like a little entryway.
But it's actually a giant bookstore. I made the trip with producer Sarah Diamond, and we went down there because the Times just started publishing guides for bookstore crawls that anyone can follow around New York City. In honor of that, we're devoting this entire episode to bookstores. We're talking to a bookstore owner. We're going to be chatting about what makes bookstores so special to readers. And last but not least, we have a ton of book recommendations of books about bookstores, about booksellers. It's going to be great.
Do you feel like you pick up a bunch of books that you then carry around the entire time you're shopping until the very end, and you're like, these are my babies, and I have to let one go?
1,000%. You see a book, and you're like, mine. I've imprinted on it. It is imprinted on me. We are in it together. So we are heading toward the back employees-only room, and we are going to chat with Sarah McNally, the owner of McNally Jackson for 22 years. They said upstairs, there's a side room. Oh, there's the Lord of the Rings. Coming to a bookstore is like, oh, my friends, there's the Lord of the Rings. There's Stephen King.
Yes, hello. Hi.
I wanted to start our conversation by asking a question I think a lot of readers have, which is, what is it like to own a bookstore? That's so many people's dream. Can you tell me about your relationship to this bookstore?
This location?
McNally Jackson in general.
McNally Jackson in general. I mean, my relationship, it's like my little family, my five kids or something. The first bookstore I opened was in 2004, and so that was the space that I had almost the strongest relationship with, because I built it when I was 29 years old with my father, who's a cabinet maker. And on the first year anniversary of that store, I drank a bottle of wine there alone, and I lay on the floor of the store, and I felt almost like every inch of that store I had touched and worked with. I hadn't had a day apart from it for that year. And that store was a profound physical relationship almost, because I worked nonstop in it for years and years and years.
Can you tell me something that readers might not know about what it means to run a bookstore?
We have always been a place where we've had so many wedding proposals here, and even weddings, and people coming for their wedding photos because they met in the stacks in our stores and then they fell in love. And so we've had so many beautiful stories. Here, we're trying to think very deliberately about how to make spaces where people who are readers can find and meet each other. And that, I don't know if that's like a secret that readers don't know about, but that is what, in our weekly meetings, we spend about 15, 20 minutes every week talking about ways in which we can make spaces for people to find each other around books.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you're seeing this summer in terms of what books readers are really excited about?
Okay, well, this is the summer of horror. I mean, last summer was the summer of romance. We were selling romance hand over fist, and this year horror is starting to really take over. And so there's amazing international horror being translated, which is kind of fun, right? I want to do some kind of feature of horror from around the world to see how different, like there's Japanese horror, there's some horror from like Nigerian horror, and how different countries how different writers in different countries interpret what is terrifying.
Every country has its myth. Every country has its sea myth, and every country has its monster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Last question, which is, can you give me a book recommendation? New, old, just something that you personally love.
Emma Cline's new book is called Switzy, and it is a masterpiece. It is a mother friggin' masterpiece, and everybody should read it. It's about something that actually sounds depressing. I'm worried if I say what it's about, people won't want to read it. So I'm not going to say what it's about. Just, it is innovative and exciting.
Thank you for the book recommendation. And thank you for just chatting in general. This has been a gift and a privilege for any book lover to get to talk to a bookstore owner and pick their brain. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Yes.
Bye. Bye. How do we get out of here?
The labyrinth. This way.
Oh, employees only.
Rounding out our bookstore trip, I, predictably, did not make it out without picking up a few books that caught my eye. These are the 5 I'd like to get. It's quite a stack.
Larry McMurtry. Lonesome Duff. Have you read any of Larry McMurtry's stuff?
I haven't, and I'm so behind. After the break, I'm talking to my colleague, Jennifer Harlan. She brings us deep into the Bookstore Crawl project. She explains how the idea came together, and she shares her criteria for the perfect route.
Do you just want the back? So I'll give you some bookmarks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're back in the studio, and to continue our bookstore celebration, I want to talk to our resident bookstore expert, Jen Harlan, a fellow editor here at The Book Review. Jen recently started a new series putting together bookstore crawls for various neighborhoods in New York City. Jen, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to do this great bookstore palooza extravaganza, all of that good stuff. So we are going to dive into the project. But before we do that, I just want to ask, what is it about bookstores? Readers have such a spiritual, personal, almost like a sacred relationship with them. What is it?
You know, going into a bookstore is both, I find it like going and like seeing a lot of old friends. You like walk around the shelves and you see books that you've loved at different points in your life, and also discovering new things that you were looking for or things you had no idea you were looking for.
You stay, you linger, you form a connection with the store, with the books, but then you form a connection with people at the site of bookstores.
Yeah, and I think that's both true in terms of developing a relationship with a bookseller. I feel like there's something so intimate about someone who really knows you and your taste and what you like and is able to give you really great recommendations. There's a real level of trust and feeling seen there. And you know when you're walking into this space that you already have something in common with the people that you're going to encounter there. You're all interested in books. And as we know, there's no better way to bond with someone than that.
For me, I got a recommendation of what became one of my favorite all-time books, and that is Delicate Edible Birds by Lauren Groff from a bookseller. And I remember I pop into 3 Lives and Company, a local bookstore here in New York, and I'm in a bad mood, and the bookseller is like, "You're looking for something. I have figured out your taste based off of what you buy every week. I think you'll love this book."
This is the dream. This is what I'm saying.
So that's one of my personal stories about bookstores. I want to know about your specific relationship with bookstores.
If you think back to little baby Jen, I think I fell in love with bookstores like really before I can even remember. I was born in Pasadena in California, and there's an amazing bookstore there called Vroman's that my parents tell me they took me to like almost every week. We went back recently, like because my brother lives in LA now, and as an adult, I didn't remember the space, and yet there was something very comforting and homey about it. I'm like, so maybe there was some like sense memory underlying
it
that.
Is in your subconscious, the home feeling of this bookstore.
Yes, I felt right at ease immediately. But I feel like even we were sort of talking about the like romance and mystique of bookstores, and I feel like in a way, I also fell in love with bookstores and specifically with New York bookstores well before I ever came to New York City.
Why? How?
One of my all-time favorite movies and one of my mom's favorite movies also is You've Got Mail, which we used to watch all the time. It is Nora Ephron's Upper West Side rom-com about Kathleen Kelly, who's played by Meg Ryan, and Joe Fox, who's played by Tom Hanks. They are rival bookstore owners. So Kathleen owns a tiny independent children's bookstore called The Shop Around the Corner, and I have never wanted to be anyone as much as I wanted to be Kathleen Kelly. If I could transport myself to any imaginary fictional place, I think it would have been The Shop Around the Corner, which to me was just the platonic ideal of a bookstore. It was cozy, but also felt expansive, and Kathleen, as a bookseller, really knew every person who came into the store, the kind of person who would sell you Anne of Green Gables or Little Women and sell it to you with a box of Kleenex because she knew you were going to need it while you read the book. And that, to me, I think really captured the magic of these spaces and what it is about bookstores that make them so special.
Well, speaking of the magic of bookstores, you just got to spend so much time experiencing firsthand what makes bookstores so special because you did this bookstore crawl project. Where did that idea come from? How did this project come to be?
We sort of came at this from 2 angles. One is that I was thinking about when I travel new places, one of my favorite ways to get to know a new place is through their bookstores. Any new city or town I go to, I always try and find whatever the local independent bookstore is and go there. I feel like it's a way to get to know sort of the personality of a place. You can see what the booksellers there are recommending, what's on the like customer favorites table. And there are also some bookstores that I think of as real touchstones for cities. Every time I'm in LA, I end up going to Skylight Books and also often Vroman's if I'm out in Pasadena. So we were thinking about like tourists coming to the city and what they might like to do that maybe wouldn't be on their typical list. But also New York in particular has a really rich history of bookstores. At one time, there was this stretch of 4th Avenue called Book Row that had almost 50 bookstores all in one stretch, the same way you have like the jewelry district or the garment district. There was a book district, Book Row, where you could go and find truly any kind of book you could ever want to find.
That sounds so incredible.
It basically went from like Union Square to Astor Place.
And a lot of those were specifically used bookstores.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking through the Times' archives, and in the early 80s, we had a story about how there were a lot of closures, but a few stores remained on Book Row. And then in 1988, there was a story that was like, Book Row is gone, but independent used bookstores still exist elsewhere. And just you can watch step by step as it's dismantled. It's kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Though, I do have to clarify, it is not all doom and gloom. I feel like we're living in a heyday of bookstores. Do you feel the same?
I feel like we are in an upswing, and not just in New York. I think across the country, we've seen a lot of this fervor and love and enthusiasm, both for books and also for bookstores as places to gather, and in particular, genre books. I mean, we've done a lot of coverage of the proliferation of romance bookstores across the country. I think we're seeing more like fantasy bookstores. You can find horror bookstores. You can find mystery bookstores, travel bookstores. So the people long to be in bookstores.
My theory about this is we so long feared that the internet would bring about the demise of the bookstore. People would be reading digitally, they'd be reading online. But I feel like it's been the opposite. The internet has created such fervent communities around niches and genres. The internet and algorithms really funnel people to specific topics, and then they want to meet in real life. They want to find a brick and mortar place to explore their interests, which is
And also find other people in real life who share those interests. I think it's also a good reminder that, like these things come in waves or cycles. First, it was, that big chains like Borders or Barnes & Noble were going to kill the independent bookstore. And then it was Amazon is going to kill all of the bookstores. And we really have not seen that happen. Like, I think the people who do love books really love them. And so it is that love that will keep them from ever truly dying.
In July, there was an NPR story that said last year there were 600 new small bookstores that opened across the U.S., which is double what it was the year before. So, like, a surge is happening. So let's pivot to the bookstore crawl. What inspired this specific idea?
Yeah. When we started talking and sort of broadly about doing something about bookstores, we quickly realized that the list of places that we loved and we wanted to share with our readers was way too long for one story, for one day. It felt really overwhelming. And so the idea for the crawl was to kind of zoom in and give you a more bite-sized segment that you could tackle in one afternoon, or that you could keep as sort of a running to-do list over the course of the summer or the fall. But to give you a sort of curated guide that would help you get to know one specific neighborhood. So we've started with Midtown Manhattan, but there will be other ones. So ways to get to know parts of the city that you may not have spent a lot of time in, or also to get to know your own neighborhood in a new way. Literally, I pulled up Google Maps on my computer and started to map out on there what would the walking route be. Because we also, if we're doing this as a crawl, not just a list of bookstores that are in a neighborhood, we want to make sure that it's a route that actually makes sense. And then we actually went out in the streets and test walked it. A group of us who worked on the project went and we walked the Midtown route. And we wanted to make sure this was accessible to a fairly broad, or as broad as we could make it, group of people.
So in that case, let's dive into the specific Midtown crawl you just published.
If you go to the Times website, you can find the whole tour there. But it goes from Rockefeller Center to Bryant Park, so a little segment of Midtown. It includes a stalwart of the independent bookstore scene in New York City, McNally Jackson, one of their locations. It includes a couple specialty bookstores, including a comic store and a theater-themed bookstore, and that is the Drama Bookshop. Pretty much any play, libretto, books about craft, about the business of theater, monologue books, anything related to that business we call show, you can find at the Drama Bookshop. We go to Book Off, which is a great used bookstore. It's actually an American outpost of a Japanese chain. And when you walk in, it looks like a nerdy memorabilia shop. There's a lot of action figures, a lot of video games. When you go upstairs, huge used bookstore section. And then the other thing we were thinking about is, if you're walking all around and doing all this book shopping, that you're going to need some fuel for that. And so we also wanted to make sure we had some fun stops to get a coffee, a snack, something to sustain you along your route.
Was there a bookstore that you just didn't know much about? Maybe it was a recommendation from someone on the desk that really surprised you.
I had never heard of Book Off before I started working on this story. I think that's just like a block in Midtown that I had not spent time on. But there's another colleague who works at the Times who, that's his go-to. He'll go and spend 3 hours there hunting through the stacks and finding some really great treasures. And so that, I think, was the biggest delightful surprise for me.
Can you give us a little teaser of what you have planned next?
Yeah, I don't want to give too much away, but I can say, yes, we definitely have other neighborhoods that are already in the works. I have received a lot of notes and comments from readers upset about their favorite beloved bookstores or bookstore neighborhoods that are not in Midtown. And I would say to them, I also love these stores, and rest assured they are coming. And I will say about our next one that it is in a different borough, not Manhattan.
Ooh, we're reading.
We're venturing
walking
farther afield. And the next one includes some of my personal favorite bookstores in New York City, including one of the oldest bookstores in New York City and one of the newest.
Well, you just mentioned venturing further afield, and we are going to do the same. I have a bunch of book recommendations about bookstores. You have a bunch of book recommendations about bookstores that we're going to share. But first, I think we should take a quick break. And now let's get into book recommendations. What are some books that you love that are set at a bookstore, that prominently feature bookstores?
So we've talked about the romance of bookstores, so I'm going to start with a romance novel, which is one of my all-time favorites, and that is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Book Lovers is about Nora, who is a New York City book agent, and Charlie, who is a New York City book editor. They are bitter rivals, but they find themselves in the same tiny town in North Carolina for the summer. And so he has come to help run the local independent bookstore, which his parents own. And over the course of the summer, he is trying to sort of fix it up, get the store back on its feet. And also he and Nora end up collaborating on a book, trying to figure out what the future holds for them. And also, of course, it's a romance falling in love. There, again, is something so romantic about a bookstore, and particularly romantic about falling in love inside a bookstore. And their very snappy, funny, witty enemies to lovers banter really reminds me of Kathleen Kelly and Joe Fox and You've Got Mail. So if that's the vibe you're looking for, I think this is the book for you.
That sounds so good. I will check this out at some point.
Please
the question is when, because we have so much reading to do, but I will read it, I promise. I actually have a recommendation of, it's not a romance, though there is a relationship that's at the center of this, and it is set in a bookstore. And that is Monogamy by Sue Miller. Have you read this?
I have not read this one.
Fantastic book. It is about this couple, Graham and Annie, and they meet in a bookstore. Annie's younger at the time. Graham is older. He's been married before. He runs a bookshop. Annie comes in. Sparks fly. They have this whirlwind relationship. They get married. Then, this is not a spoiler, it happens early, Graham dies.
Oh, no.
Then, the secrets start coming out. They seem like they had this perfect marriage, but there's more to the story. And it's just, the book is thoughtful and meditative. You're thinking about love and relationships, but it all starts with this beautiful, charming bookstore meetup.
Oh my God, you've sold me. I'm hooked. I'm adding it to my list for the next bookstore I'm in. I am going to recommend a memoir next.
Ooh, nonfiction.
Nonfiction for me, I know, which is it's a little off brand for me, but this book is called Time Was Soft There by Jeremy Mercer. And it is about the time that he spent at one of my favorite bookstores in the entire world, which is Shakespeare and Company in Paris. So Jeremy was a crime journalist. He's from Canada, and he got into some hot water with a source who he had perhaps treated not the most ethically, and fled Canada, moves to Paris, is trying to figure out what he's going to do, and one day stumbles into the bookshop, and the woman who's working at the front desk invites him upstairs for a tea party. And he meets the owner of the bookshop, this man, George Whitman, and discovers that they have this semi-official program there where there are people called tumbleweeds who live in the bookstore. They sleep there for free.
Talk about a dream.
I know, truly. That when I discovered that this was my longtime dream, and I have not yet achieved it. But basically the way the program works, and has since the store started, is that you live there for free. In exchange, you help out in the store and with setting up for events. You are supposed to read a book every day. And then before you leave the store, you have to write a one-page biography of yourself that you leave on file. And so they have this archive of the accounts of all of the people who have passed through Shakespeare and Company's doors. The store itself has this incredible history. It is named for a store that existed in the early 20th century, founded by Sylvia Beach, where Ernest Hemingway and James Joyce hung out. It was shut down by the Nazis, but had this very storied literary history. And if you go to Shakespeare and Company, if you look really closely, you can spot some of the benches. You can see where the sheets have been tucked under, where like maybe someone's going to sleep there that night. So it's a fun little Easter egg.
That's so cool. So if you can't venture there, we have a book that'll bring
Jeremy
you
will take you there virtually, in his mind.
I also have a nonfiction book recommendation, and this is for anyone who wants to know the history of the American bookstore, how bookstores fit into our culture. And that recommendation is The Bookshop, A History of the American Bookstore by Evan Friss.
Very apropos.
This is a cultural, historical, social investigation into, as the subtitle tells you, American bookstores. It's a book that evaluates individual bookstores. It provides context about how bookstores live in the American space. And so if you want to get meta about the bookstore as a concept, this is a book for you.
Incredible. Okay, I couldn't recommend books without recommending a fantasy novel. And so
our fantasy columnist.
That is me. And so the last one I'm going to talk about is A Marvelous Light by Freya Marske. This is a historical fantasy set in an alternate version of Edwardian England. And it follows Robin, who is the newly orphaned son of these two British aristocrats, who gets placed into what he thinks is going to be a really boring bureaucratic civil service job. And it turns out that the job is actually a position of liaison between the non-magical world and this entire magical version of England that Robin did not know existed. And his counterpart in this endeavor is Edwin, who is the son of this very old magical family and is kind of the black sheep of the family, because rather than relying on pure power, he uses books and other devices to kind of guide his magic. Together, they team up to solve this magical mystery, far-reaching conspiracy. There's also a really beautiful and passionate love story. The reason I bring it up today is because Edwin, in particular, loves bookstores and spends a lot of time in the book hunting through them for old magical texts. A lot of the bookstores he goes to have these kind of secret rooms or secret passages in the back where if you are a magician, you can access them, which I think is like every kid's dream. And I love the way the author describes the first bookstore that he walks into. She writes, "The warmth of the shop and the damp of the rain gave the air a greenhouse feel, which vanished as Edwin moved between shelves to the back of the shop. Here, the air was as it should be, dry, edged with dust and leather and paper." And I was like, I can smell that. I can feel that. I want to be in that bookstore.
Go read the book. Can you give us the title one more time?
A Marvelous Light by Freya Marske.
My last book recommendation is a book that I think went kind of under the radar, but I love it so much, not just because it is about bookstores, but because it's such a snappy, smart, coming-of-age story, and that is The Rachel Incident by Caroline O'Donoghue. This is about two young adults who meet while working at a bookstore. They're kind of like aimless. They don't know what's next. And it's their launching pad. And the book follows their lifelong friendship while they're also navigating various trials and tribulations and scandals. The reason why I love this book, and it illuminated something that I think is really important in all books about friendship, it's one word: chemistry. The way these characters fit together, the way they lock in is so important and so special. I think the individual challenges they face, interesting, dishy, but what is at the heart of this book, what stands out to me, is watching these two people navigate what they mean to each other. It's for, if you love books like Normal People or anything by Sally Rooney, you're going to love this book. And again, starts with a bookstore.
I have to confess, I have not read this one yet either, but this sounds extraordinarily up my alley.
Jen, run, don't walk, run to go read this book. I think, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Jen.
It went by so fast.
This is really fun. Can we also just do a big, big shared thank you to booksellers everywhere?
Yes.
You make our lives better. You make our lives possible.
You do.
Thank you.
Truly.
The book review is produced by Sarah Diamond, Amy Pearl, and Patricia Subaran. It's edited by Tracy Mumford and mixed this week by Daniel Ramirez. Original music by Dan Powell and Alicia Itu. Special thanks to Dahlia Haddad. We want to hear what you think about the show, so send us an email at thebookreview@nytimes.com. I'm MJ Franklin, in for Gilbert Cruz. Thanks for listening.